July 2021. A photograph appeared online that stopped longtime movie fans in their tracks. Two men stood side by side, older now, grayer, carrying decades of history in their faces. One was Kurt Russell. The other was Val Kilmer. For many people, it felt like a reunion between two legends. A celebration of Tombstone, the film that had transformed a simple Western into something far more enduring. A movie quoted by generations. A movie whose mythology seemed to grow stronger every year. But for those who had followed Hollywood closely, the image raised a different question. Why had it taken so long? For nearly 3 decades, Kurt Russell had spoken publicly about Tombstone dozens of times. He discussed the production. He discussed the challenges. He discussed the script, the directing turmoil, the weather, the horses, the costumes, and the impossible task of bringing Wyatt Earp to life. Yet whenever the conversation turned toward Val Kilmer, something unusual happened. Russell became careful, measured, almost protective. He praised the performance. Always the performance. Doc Holliday, one of the greatest supporting performances in modern film history. But the man behind the character? That story remained largely untold. And perhaps the most fascinating part of all is that Val Kilmer did exactly the same thing. 2 actors. 1 iconic film. 30 years of silence. Why? What happened between them? Was there a feud? A rivalry? A friendship that never quite became a friendship? Or was the truth something much more complicated? Because this is not really a story about conflict. It's a story about 2 men who approached art in completely different ways. 2 men who needed each other to create something unforgettable. And 2 men who spent decades saying less than the world wanted them to say. To understand that silence, we have to begin long before Tombstone. Long before Doc Holliday. Long before Wyatt Earp. We have to begin with a little boy growing up inside Hollywood. Kurt Russell was born on March 17, 1951. Unlike many actors who arrived in Hollywood as outsiders chasing a dream, Russell grew up inside the industry itself. His father, Bing Russell, was a respected character actor. Not a superstar, not a household name, but exactly the kind of working professional who kept the entertainment business running. Bing appeared in hundreds of television episodes and films throughout his career. He understood something that many ambitious young actors never learn. Talent matters, but reputation matters too. Hollywood remembers everything. The people who complain. The people who create drama. The people who burn bridges. Eventually, the industry notices. Young Kurt watched his father navigate that world carefully. Professionally. Respectfully. Those lessons stayed with him. By the time Russell became a Disney child star in the 1960s, he had already developed a reputation that would follow him for the rest of his career. Reliable. Prepared. Easy to work with. The kind of actor producers trusted. The kind of actor studios wanted. And perhaps most importantly, the kind of actor who rarely spoke publicly about private disagreements. Over the next several decades, Russell built one of the most diverse careers in Hollywood. From Disney adventures to action films. From comedy to science fiction. From Escape from New York to The Thing. He became something increasingly rare in modern entertainment. A star who survived multiple generations of Hollywood without becoming trapped by a single image. But while Russell was building his career through consistency, another young actor was taking a very different path. Val Kilmer arrived in Hollywood with a different kind of reputation. Brilliant, intense, fearlessly committed. Born in Los Angeles in 1959, Kilmer possessed extraordinary talent from an early age. He became the youngest student ever accepted into the prestigious drama program at the Juilliard School at that time. Even among gifted performers, he stood out. Teachers noticed it. Classmates noticed it. Directors noticed it. Kilmer didn't simply perform characters. He disappeared into them. For some actors, a role is something they play. For Val Kilmer, a role became something he inhabited. That distinction would define his entire career. It helped create some of the most memorable performances of his generation. It also created challenges that would follow him for decades. By the early 1990s, both men had established themselves as major Hollywood stars. but they had arrived there through completely different philosophies. Russell believed preparation created freedom. Know your lines. Know your character. Know your marks. Then trust yourself. Kilmer believed transformation created truth. Become the character completely. Live inside their psychology. Carry them beyond the camera. Lose yourself until the performance feels real. Neither approach was wrong. In fact, both approaches had produced remarkable results. But in 1992, fate would place those two philosophies on the same movie set. And that set was already heading toward chaos. The project was called Tombstone. Today, it's remembered as one of the greatest westerns ever made. At the time, however, its future was anything but certain. The production faced uncertainty from the beginning. Creative disagreements emerged. Studio concerns grew louder. Schedules became increasingly complicated. Then came the decision that changed everything. The original director was removed during production. Suddenly, a film already struggling to find stability found itself facing a leadership crisis. A new director was brought in. But according to numerous accounts that would emerge years later, something unusual happened behind the scenes. Kurt Russell began taking on responsibilities that extended far beyond acting, helping shape decisions, helping maintain direction, helping keep the production moving forward. Officially, he was the star. Unofficially, many people believed he was becoming much more than that. At the exact same moment, Val Kilmer was diving deeper into Doc Holliday than perhaps anyone expected. The role consumed him. The voice, the movements, the physical deterioration caused by tuberculosis. Every detail mattered. Every scene became an opportunity to discover something new. What emerged on screen was extraordinary. But what emerged behind the scenes was a growing collision between two fundamentally different ways of making art. One man focused on structure. The other focused on immersion. One needed predictability. The other embraced unpredictability. Neither could fully become the other. And as filming continued across the Arizona desert, the tension between those approaches quietly began to build. Not hatred, not war, something far more complicated. Professional friction between two exceptionally talented men pursuing the same goal through completely different paths. Neither of them knew it yet, but that friction would help create cinematic history. And it would leave behind a mystery that audiences would spend the next 30 years trying to understand. There is a moment in nearly every great film that audiences remember forever. For Tombstone, it wasn't a gunfight. It wasn't Wyatt Earp standing alone against impossible odds. It wasn't even the famous walk through the streets of Tombstone. It was a quiet sentence. "I'm your Huckleberry." For words. Less than 4 seconds on screen. Yet those 4 seconds became one of the most quoted lines in modern cinema. People still repeat it today. They print it on t-shirts. They build entire videos around it. New generations discover the scene every year, often without realizing how much work went into creating a moment that appears so effortless. According to numerous accounts from people involved with the production, Val Kilmer prepared obsessively for scenes like that one. Every pause, every glance, every breath carried intention. He studied the effects of tuberculosis, experimented with Doc Holliday's Southern dialect, and searched for the smallest physical details that would convince audiences they weren't watching an actor. They were watching a dying gunfighter refusing to surrender his wit. It was an extraordinary commitment. It was also incredibly demanding for everyone around him. Method acting has always fascinated Hollywood because it produces unforgettable performances while often placing enormous pressure on an entire production. When an actor refuses to leave a character behind after the cameras stop rolling, the line between performance and reality begins to blur. Crew members don't simply work with an actor. They work with the character. That process can produce artistic brilliance. It can also slow schedules, complicate rehearsals, and create uncertainty for fellow performers who never know exactly what will happen once the director calls action. Kurt Russell approached acting from the opposite direction. His philosophy was rooted in preparation before the cameras rolled. Know the script, know the scene, understand your character completely, then allow instinct to do the rest. It wasn't less serious. It was simply different. Russell believed professionalism meant consistency. Every take should be strong. Every crew member should know what to expect. Every day on set represented hundreds of people whose livelihoods depended on staying on schedule. Those two philosophies collided almost daily during Tombstone. Not because either man lacked respect for the other, because each believed deeply in his own process. One searched for complete artistic surrender. The other searched for disciplined precision. The remarkable thing is that neither tried to publicly prove the other wrong. Instead, they simply continued working. Years later, production stories slowly emerged from people who had witnessed the filming firsthand. Their recollections painted a picture that was far more nuanced than the sensational headlines that occasionally appeared. There were disagreements. There was frustration. There were long shooting days made even longer by unexpected creative choices. But there were no dramatic public feuds. No explosive confrontations. No lasting campaign to damage another person's reputation. In fact, the opposite seemed to happen. When Kurt Russell eventually spoke about Tombstone, he consistently returned to one point. Val Kilmer's performance was extraordinary. He never qualified that statement. He never followed it with criticism. He simply acknowledged what audiences themselves had already concluded. Doc Holliday had become legendary. That restraint is remarkable when viewed through the lens of what Russell was quietly carrying behind the scenes. In a 2018 interview, Russell revealed something that many fans had never heard before. Following the replacement of the film's original director, he became deeply involved in guiding the production itself. Shot selection, creative decisions, story structure, working closely with the incoming director to ensure the film remained coherent despite the turmoil surrounding it. It was an enormous responsibility. Officially, he wasn't directing. Unofficially, many insiders believed he had become the creative anchor holding the project together. Imagine carrying that responsibility while simultaneously delivering the lead performance. Imagine balancing budgets, schedules, creative disagreements, studio expectations, and your own scenes. Now imagine doing all of that alongside a co-star whose artistic process thrived on unpredictability. Suddenly, the tension surrounding Tombstone looks very different. It wasn't simply two actors clashing. It was two different visions of filmmaking existing inside the same production. Russell needed momentum. Kilmer needed exploration. Russell needed consistency. Kilmer needed discovery. Neither approach could fully function without occasionally frustrating the other. Yet somehow something extraordinary happened. Instead of weakening the film, those differences strengthened it. Watch their scenes together today. Russell's Wyatt Earp feels grounded, steady, quietly authoritative.